Fellas, I'm sure you've all heard of Michael Chandler, known for being the guy that gets so close to finishing his opponents and getting that win and always ends up fumbling it in the next round or whenever it may be. He always fumbles fights when he's so close to winning them, and that is the story of Michael Chandler. Now, before we get into any of the reasons why he always finds a way to lose, we'll talk about why Michael Chandler's gifted. What is it that makes Michael Chandler so special in the octagon? Now, first of all, I'm going to talk about his physical attributes, his power, strength, and athleticism. Yeah, Michael Chandler is one of the most explosive and athletic fighters in the 155 division. He's an absolute machine in that division. He's strong. He's just a ball of muscle, essentially. And he's dangerous as well. He's got knockout power. And he could sleep anyone in the division. It doesn't matter if he's fighting Islam Makhachev, Charles. It doesn't matter who Michael Chandler's fighting. He has the ability to finish anyone at any time. And that's why he's come close to finishing pretty much every single opponent he's faced. Pretty much every single opponent he's faced, win or loss, Michael Chandler has come so close to finishing them, or he has finished them, and that's because of how scary and how dangerous he's in the octagon. He's a ball of muscle, he hits like a truck. Not sure if he's natural, but either way, he's athletic. I mean, to be honest, he probably shows more athleticism in his post-fight celebration than he does in his actual, in octagon fight time, but yeah, Michael Chandler's an absolute beast. He's strong, he's powerful, and overall, he's got a really good... the physical attributes he's got for MMA is pretty much a nightmare for anyone that he goes against. But we'll talk about the style of Michael Chandler. Physical attributes aside, what skill does Michael Chandler possess? What martial arts does he possess? Well, first of all, amazing wrestling. Amazing wrestling offensively and defensively. He had a Bellator wrestling background. He's been wrestling pretty much his entire career. He did show a lot more wrestling in Bellator than he has in the UFC, but his wrestling's amazing. He's one of the best wrestlers in the 155 division. He's shown it in a few fights. He doesn't show it much, but he has definitely got a great wrestling base, and that's why a lot of fighters that he's gone against, even though he's gone against a lot of strikers, no one in the UFC has really been able to take him down and keep him there for a significant amount of time. He's also a great kickboxer, as Michael Chandler. Like I said, his fight IQ might not be there, but as a kickboxer, he's dangerous. He knows what to do at the right time. Well, actually, no, I'm going to rephrase that. Sometimes he knows what to do at the right time. Sometimes he'll make a completely bad decision, but kickboxing, he's definitely got high-level kickboxing and Thai boxing, and his submission defense as well. He's faced people like Charles Oliveira. He's faced a lot of submission artists in his career, and the only person that's ever been able to submit him is in his last fight against Dustin Poirier, where he got submitted by Poirier. You take that fight off his record, never been submitted, so he's got an amazing submission defense as Michael Chandler. So it's hard to finish him when it comes to grappling, which makes him a solid fighter with a solid base of martial arts. But now we're going to talk about how he threw it all away. What stops Michael Chandler from getting these finishes? If he's so good and he's got such a good base, what is it that, stops Michael Chandler from winning? And I put AKA his fight IQ. The one thing that stops him. I mean, there's a few examples in his UFC career. I mean, he's been mocked for it before. MMA fighters have mocked him for it, even MMA fans. It's kind of like a mythical fighter. Michael Chandler, the mythical fighter, if he had fight IQ. He's got everything but fight IQ, and everyone's mocked it in his, his career. A few examples when he had, he nearly finished Poirier at UFC 281. Poirier even admitted in an interview if Michael Chandler would have continued striking with him, he could have potentially got him out of there. And he was about to finish Poirier, and what does he do? He goes for a takedown. Classic Michael Chandler. Or against Charles Oliveira when he fumbled the finish over Charles Oliveira. If he would have beaten Charles Oliveira, he would have become a UFC champion in his second ever UFC fight. After debuting against Dan Hooker and got an immediate title shot, if he'd have beaten Michael Chandler, if he'd have beaten Charles Oliveira, he would have been a champion, but he didn't. In fact, he ended up being the one getting finished in the second round against Charles Oliveira after nearly finishing him in the first round. Even against Justin Gaethje, now that was a bit back and forth. It wasn't like he made absolutely terrible decisions, but there was so many points throughout the fight when Michael Chandler could have capitalized, because the fight was so sloppy. There were so many openings for Michael Chandler to go in there, and he could have pulled off a decision win if he'd have, stopped trying to be so exciting for the fans. Which, to be honest, as a fan, I don't blame him. But if he'd have actually gone for the finish, he could have easily, or gone for the win, he could have definitely beaten Justin Gaethje. And I'm going to compare him to Islam Makhachev now. On paper, you can't really compare them both. You've got one guy in Michael Chandler who's lost to Poirier. He's been finished by Poirier, finished by Charles Oliveira, lost to Justin Gaethje, and his only wins are Tony Ferguson and Dan Hooker. And you've got Islam, who's also beaten Dan Hooker, but he's also finished Oliveira. He's beaten Volkanovski twice. He's TKO'd Bobby Green. You look at them on paper, you can't even compare them both. But I still feel like Michael Chandler is a nightmare matchup for Islam Makhachev. An absolute nightmare matchup for him. I think if there's one guy in the division that stylistically goes against Islam, it's Michael Chandler. I mean, we'll talk about the worst style opponent for Islam. First, a wrestler, someone that can grapple with him, someone with a good wrestling base against Islam Makhachev. Because, listen, if you've not got wrestling and you're against Islam Makhachev, it's a recipe for disaster. The guy will take you down and do what he wants with you. So you have to be good wrestling. I thought scary power and great striker as well. You need to pose some form of threat to Islam Makhachev on the feet. Being a good striker just isn't enough against Islam because he's so well-rounded. He's also a good striker. He'll mix it up. He's well-rounded. He'll keep you guessing. I've also put high base as well. You need to keep Islam guessing. You can't let him try and do his game plan against you. You've got to do your game plan against him. Pressuring Islam using a high pace is definitely the way to, make Islam more beatable. But then you take all those weaknesses of Islam Makhachev, and that's exactly what Michael Chandler is. He's a wrestler. Like I said before, he's got this wrestling background. He's got scary knockout power. He's a great striker. He's got such a high pace in the octagon. And that's why I potentially think Michael Chandler, even though he's never going to get to the top because he loses to all the contenders to do so, I still feel like in the octagon, he's one of the most dangerous people for Islam Makhachev. And then we go to why Michael Chandler may even struggle against McGregor. Now, you see that title and you might think that's a terrible take. Conor McGregor hasn't won a fight since Donald Cerrone in early 2020. Michael Chandler's been, he's been a lot more active recently, at least. He's got a more recent win. Stylistically, a nightmare for McGregor. And to be honest, you're not wrong, especially for the fact that McGregor's been doing terrible things in his personal life. It's not like he's been training ever since the loss to Poirier and the injury. But the first reason I think Michael Chandler may struggle against McGregor is Chandler's going to know that everyone's watching and he's going to throw the fight IQ out the window. It's no surprise that Michael Chandler, he throws the fight IQ in the window and exchanges it for exciting fights, which, to be honest, as a fan, I don't blame him for. Well, I do blame him for it, but I'm not going to complain because it's entertaining to watch. We all know Michael Chandler's an entertaining fighter, but when he's fighting the biggest star in the sport, it's probably going to, no, not probably, it will be the most watched fight of the year when Conor McGregor's back. There's no way that guy's going to do anything less than an absolutely banger and an entertaining fight. And he's definitely gonna sacrifice a lot to make it entertaining. And I've also put, I could definitely see him getting chinned as well, because he's not going to be using the game plan, because he's going to be throwing the fight IQ out in the window and trying to have an entertaining scrap against McGregor. I can definitely see him getting chinned. Now, I'm not acting like McGregor's some sort of knockout artist in 2023. Like I said, his last finish was against Donald Cerrone, but Michael Chandler's been dropped in so many fights. He was dropped against Poirier, dropped against Gaethje, dropped against Tony Ferguson as well, dropped against Charles Oliveira. I'm pretty sure the only fighter in the UFC that he hasn't been dropped by is Dan Hooker on his debut. And McGregor, he can hit hard. I'm not saying he's one of the hardest hitters in the UFC, but he can hit hard. And when you're against McGregor, and if McGregor connects with Michael Chandler, I've got a fear that Michael Chandler he could potentially get finished against McGregor. And my overall takes, Michael Chandler has what it takes to become a UFC champion. That's a bold take, but he definitely does. He's got the athleticism, he's got the physical attributes, he's got the martial arts, he's got everything it takes to become a UFC champion. And he's also, like I said, physically gifted, has a great base for MMA, but his fight IQ doesn't exist. And because even though, like I said before, he might even be a dangerous fight for Islam, because the fight IQ doesn't exist, he's never going to beat the contenders he has to beat to get to the top. So overall, my thoughts on Michael Chandler is that he's a dangerous fighter. Most importantly, he's an entertaining fighter, and I can't wait to watch him fight. But if you're a Michael Chandler fan, it has to be frustrating because of how many times he doesn't do logical things in the octagon, logical decisions. So let me know your thoughts on Michael Chandler. Do you think he actually has what it takes to get a title shot? Well, just let me know your thoughts on him overall, and thank you for watching.